Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is net worth. We're talking about money these days and some of the concepts around it and the ways that it impacts us emotionally, materially, et cetera, et cetera. So today we're talking about net worth and how that relates, if at all, to our sense of our self-worth. So good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to be with you this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. It should be an interesting conversation, looking at how we assign value to things and to experiences and to humans, etc. So before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the motion, the pressure, and the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, Gia, welcome. Good evening and good morning to you. It's great to have you joining us. So today we're talking about net worth and this concept. In transformational work, we talk a lot about self-worth, but we're going to talk about net worth a little bit today and how it might relate to self-worth. Net worth in financial terms is a calculation that is made by taking the value of all your assets, everything you own, all your savings, all your possessions, and subtracting from that value all your debts, all your deficits. So all your any credit card balances, any loans that are outstanding, any like mortgages or car payments, student loans, credit card debt, loans to your aunts or uncles, any of those things that are deficits, things that you're still paying on. And then the balance is what is interpreted as your net worth. And I'm just thinking about that concept, that we look at valuing humans in a way that is so mechanical and dry and devoid of humanity in its way, like what's your net worth? Just the concept of like that our worth as humans could be tied to the amount of money that we have, that the money that we have dictates in some way, shape, or form our value as humans, our net worth. And if we stand back from it, it's kind of an appalling concept, isn't it? To step back and to say we're valuing people based on dollars and cents, like, or based on material possessions, or it's kind of a crazy thing, right? So what about who we are as human beings? What if someone is an incredible activist who has initiated all kinds of change for the better in the world, who is an advocate for Mother Nature, who has initiated or catalyzed public policy to transform the planet, and let's just say that maybe they live in an impoverished country, or maybe they don't. Maybe they live here, and they don't make a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of money. Can you tell me that that person is worth less than someone who has millions and millions of dollars and owns a chemical company that pollutes the planet? I mean, it's very interesting how we tie just the term by itself, net worth, is so reductive and so deeply oversimplified. It's fascinating to me how there are circles where that's the thing that matters, is your financial picture, and that is the measure of your merit as a human. And it leaves me somewhat dumbstruck, really, if we look at that, if we look at it head on, to recognize that this is something that shapes our culture. In fact, it shapes so much in our entire world, this our financial picture. And in so many ways it is, well, it's created in such a way that it's devoid of value, really, values like true values, like personal values of merit, merit. What do we value? It's devoid of value. It's calculated based on, I think, something that we could consider rather a false metric. It was really interesting. In my household, everything I did, my father would say, "Are you getting paid?" And that was the way to value what I did, what I engaged in. So if someone is making beautiful art or beautiful music, or writing books, or being an activist, or volunteering and supporting people in in helping people in the world, those things don't necessarily create, they can, but they don't necessarily create revenue. So does that make them worth less? Does it make them worthless? And does it make them worth less than the people, for instance, on Wall Street, who are and in banks, who are trading in bad loans and creating a financial crisis? It's fascinating, don't you think? I mean, really, if we look at the way that we value things, that we pay sports players millions of dollars and teachers fractional amount of that, that farmers who are creating our food supply are struggling to make ends meet, and often using supplements for their farms that they've been told are going to improve their yield, but that are damaging to the earth because they need to feed their families. And they're feeding the planet, and they're struggling. Things are so upside down and backwards in so many ways, right? We talk about net worth. So how do we assess the value of a human being? So Gia says, in my experience, Mira, that more than how others value us, it's how much we value ourselves. And we reflect that consciously or unconsciously. And once we learn to value ourselves, love ourselves unconditionally, automatically our scale on which we rate others shifts. I love that, Gia. That's so beautiful. So I agree that when we value ourselves, it gives us the ability to value others more openly, right? Because we're not feeling threatened. We're not feeling in competition with others. We don't need to put others down in order to elevate ourselves. And that's so much of what we're conditioned to in our economy also. It's competition. Who has the latest and greatest this, that, or the other widget? Who's making more money? Who's our standards are so skewed and strange, right? To the way that we assign value. And so this comes back to really what you're saying, Gia, that if we value ourselves, if we have a sense of self-worth, if we can allow ourselves to be whole and worthy just by virtue of being here, that we don't need to prove ourselves, that we don't need to make something of ourselves because we are already sufficient. What would life be like if we could then pursue the callings of our hearts and souls? Just because, here we are, we're here and we're worthy. If we don't have to prove ourselves, we don't have to necessarily comply with the standards of the rat race that say making something of yourself means making a certain amount of money for a living, having a certain career that is socially acceptable and remunerated. What if there are more important ways to value ourselves? Maybe we get to be connected to nature. Maybe we get to be a part of nature rather than apart from nature. Maybe we get to feel connected as part of this greater web of life that we are here participating in, that we are playing our unique role in, and that every component of this vast web of being has its value, is valuable in its contribution just by nature of its being. It's interesting because if we can extrapolate this idea to the notion of, for instance, weeds or invasive species. So many of the things that we have decided to call weeds because they encroach on our lawns, for instance, are medicinal plants. They have medicinal value. They are also medicinal value to humans, and that's one aspect of their role, a very small aspect, no doubt, but they're also interacting with all the other life forms, where nature is often making corrective measures that we don't fully appreciate, or that may be encroaching upon our ideas of what we think should be. And so we call these things weeds, and we look to eliminate pests that may actually, most likely, in a greater scheme of things, nature has some kind of plan for these things, and that's why they're showing up. You know, they have a role, they're doing something. It may not be something that we like as human beings, but what if they were serving some kind of beneficial purpose that we're not really seeing, you know, in a greater scheme of things? And so when we talk about worth, when we talk about net worth, getting back to this material vantage point, as I said, it's very reductive, you know, because it's stripping away everything that isn't material, right? It's valuing based on material possessions alone. So what about people who are minimalists, who have pretty much relinquished all their material possessions, or most of their material possessions? So, and who knows, maybe they have savings, maybe they don't. What if someone is living off the land? Where does that go with this whole notion of net worth? You know, where is the value of net worth applied when we talk about financial net worth? What is the arena where that's meaningful? It's meaningful in the world of money, and there's certainly quite a lot of flexibility that can occur when we have money to do things with, given that that is the means of exchange for the most part throughout the world. But it doesn't reflect, it reflects power in certain circles, right? In certain arenas, but not in an absolute way. I mean, Rosa Parks. Think of Rosa Parks, who was instrumental in a movement of civil rights. You know, in terms of net worth in finances, most likely she was not a woman of great means. I don't know, she could have been, but I have my suspicions. And yet, look at the impact that her courage has had on the lives of millions and millions and millions of people. And so I think in thinking about money and thinking about worth and thinking about value and thinking about worthiness, I think it's incredibly important for us to be looking at and recognizing that so many of the things that we assume to be true, or that we assume in our everyday way of being, the assumptions that keep our economy going and that keep our world turning the way it's turning, these assumptions need to be examined. We need to be looking at some of these, or as many as possible of these underlying assumptions that go unquestioned, that perpetuate the way that we interact with ourselves, each other, our families, our communities, our cities, our nation, other nations. That there are these assumptions that these things are real, that the economy is something other than something that we've made up. And when we start questioning these assumptions, it gives us an opportunity to perhaps awaken to new potentials that have previously been unavailable to us. So Gia says, I think comparison, jealousy, name calling, or treating people based on their financial status or behaving disrespectfully with lesser financial status all emerges from our own insecurities, inferiority complexes. Once we start healing our own inner selves, everything changes. So I agree, Gia, that when we have our own sense of security, the valuations of others are not so important. And we do get to recognize that we live in a society that makes these valuations. So our sense of inequity or our judgments of self and others aren't originating here. They're originating from externalities that we've been programmed and conditioned to, I think, to a great degree. So Gia continues, once we start healing our own inner selves, everything changes. We see everything as a reflection of our own personality. Outside world acts as a mirror for us to correct ourselves. Though financial status is important, but in my experience, it allows us to create much more wealth with open minds and purity of heart. How beautifully, beautifully said, Gia. Indeed, that as we experience greater worthiness, then we can allow ourselves to receive. And we can allow ourselves to engage. So many of us have such negative thought and belief around money. And as we heal ourselves, we also can be healing our notion about money. And I believe it's so important to transform the way that we relate to money, the way that we experience money, the way that we interact with it, in order to be able to change our world. It's just like a canary in a coal mine. It's a flexion point. It's something, money is something that reaches into so many different dimensions of our experience and the way we interact with each other, that in order to transform the way that the world occurs going forward, as we transform ourselves, we also get to transform our relationship with money. And in the process of transforming our relationship with money, it's going to require that we transform ourselves. So that's where we're headed with this, to look at what are we willing to do for money, and why. And this whole notion of net worth and self-worth, and shifting language, because this language around net worth, it's just kind of, as I said, it's so reductive, and that reductiveness, if that's a word, is reflective of so much of how our society operates that needs to be expanded. So that's it for this morning. Thank you for engaging in this conversation, and for being willing to look at the things that we take for granted, the invisible assumptions that shape so much of our experience. And I just deeply appreciate your engagement in these conversations. So until next time, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much love.